What follows is the second half of my conversation with Brandt Andrist and B.J. Becker. If you missed the first half, I would highly recommend you give it a listen before diving in. But I wouldn't dream of telling you what to do. You are your own person. So, without any more delay, here is Art 101 Revisited Part 4, Lying to Tell the Truth.
Saying smell the roses, look at them, or at least think about them. It's having the effect on that religious painting is having the effect on you that it would, given your vantage point. Yeah. And at least you're sort of meeting the artist halfway, even if their intention was to inspire an awe of God. Yes. And you don't feel that same awe. It at least is having the effect on you.
Yeah, you feel the awe, even if you don't feel the God.
Exactly.
And you know what? I think that's enough.
That's
I think
the best.
It's more than enough.
That's the best they could hope for. If an artist could paint well enough to change your whole worldview, and it worked universally on everybody, that would be a pretty terrifying craft.
that would be pretty heavy guns.
Yeah.
And now, okay, we're going to pause here. And what you said about, here we are. We come across a medieval painting, and we both say, "I'm an atheist, but that's a really sweet painting. I really, that's pretty awe-inspiring." Score one for the artist, Christian or not.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's me who walks in and sees a girl in a red hat by Vermeer, and it literally takes my breath away, even though I have seen the painting 100 times in duplicate, in reproduction,
right,
and all sorts of media. I walk in and I see it, and I can hardly walk across the room to get close to it because I'm on the verge of tears. Mm-hmm. Because this girl is just so beautiful, and I'm in love with her, and she's been dead for 500 years, and so has the artist. There's a masterpiece for you, right? All of that, and now, how much was it worth? That bizarre thing.
Yeah.
That bizarre thing of somehow we have this process of attaching monetary worth to somebody who can make an atheist feel awe. And what you're talking about, art isn't about that kind of value.
Right.
Yeah. and nevertheless,
though the pieces that get talked about the most are also very valuable.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's a certain point where these things have inherent value because we value either the history behind them or the people that made them. Even the worst Rembrandt painting is still going to be worth more than anything I've ever made.
At least for the time being.
For the time being.
Yeah.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is a really good point. I mean, the value. That's part of the reason why I think I feel a drive to continue returning to creating paintings, even no matter what my mood is at the time, right? No matter how I feel about my own work or how I feel about its reception, is that you can have that effect. And even if it only happens to one person, it's kind of worth it.
Yeah.
I feel like slaving over something for 20, 50, 100 hours. If you can make someone feel that connection to your work, like where they stop and see it from across the room, then the effort is worth it. And the reason why it's not discouraging, even if you feel poorly about your work at the time, is that you have no idea what state the person is, what state people are going to be in when they're viewing it.
Yes.
I remember being, a teenager and finding what I would consider now to be pretty bad artwork online, and yet at that time I had never seen anything like it, and it totally changed my life.
That's the point.
Yeah.
The phrase we use is it speaks to you.
Yeah, it speaks to me, and it would be a shame if the artist was had, peers that were superior in technique to them and decided not to paint that day because they just didn't feel like they could measure up to other people, and I had never seen it because they were they were in a mood or something.
Well, it's not about that, although
I never lived up to my potential because I just didn't feel like it.
yeah, there is that. Okay, there's your trouble. Nevertheless, and this is a very strange thing. There is a very strange thing. You see, quality is different from taste.
Yeah, that's
There's a
true.
distinction from taste.
I think that's true.
And I had interesting, as I mentioned before, when I started having brunch with my brother-in-law, and as so often happens in these situations, Kincaid came up,
Of course.
because we were talking.
He can't hurt you anymore.
He can't hurt me. He can't hurt anyone. Well, I don't know. I think he's done a lot of damage.
He may have come up the last time we had this conversation.
Yeah. And the thing about that, and in all fairness, it has to be said for people who like his images, people to whom it speaks to, whether I think his art is very good or not, and in spite of any criticism that I could make, and there are plenty, for those people that like that, there's nothing wrong with that, because there's no accounting for taste. And I remember watching a little snippet of a film. I think it was about John Cage of all things, but they had part of an interview with Marcel Duchamp, who painted the Nude Descending the Staircase and the pissoir, the urinal cold fountain, and signed R. Mutt, right? And he made the comment in this interview. He said that there are three types of taste. There's good taste and bad taste, and then there is indifferent. He said, I am on the side of indifferent. That's an interesting thing for an artist to say. But I think he's being very honest about that, and he's saying that my art should not be a successful one, not according to whether it appeals to people with good taste. It should be valued or not according to whether it's high quality or not. What is the quality? Quality is not a matter of taste. And John has just poured himself a lovely looking glass of IPA, which I'm probably not going to drink because I don't like
You'll
the IPA.
pour it and then you'll taste it and you'll be like, this was a bad
this is a bad decision. Because
Nice.
that's a matter of taste. Nevertheless, in the world of beer, that's a beautiful looking glass of beer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for people who like that taste, superb. Great. It has quality within its area. So back to the subject of quality, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this to you guys before, is I love to play the museum game. And that's where you go into a museum for the first time, and you walk into a room in the museum, and you look around the museum, and you see what are the paintings, what are the sculptures, what are the works of art that strike you. And then you go and you look at the little label and say, who is it by? Now sometimes there are artists that you recognize, and you say, there's a Degas. I will like that, and I like it anyway. But I remember going into a portrait gallery in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and there's this whole gallery full of paintings of old Dutch men and old Dutch women, and they were all great. And you said Rembrandt could, the worst Rembrandt is still better than anything you can do. I look at the worst painting in there is still better than any portrait I could paint. Certainly now. I mean, give me time. I still got a few years left here. I might get there. Anyway. So there's these wonderful Baroque paintings, and I just glanced around and I said, oh, that one, and that one, and that one. And I went up, Rembrandt, Frans Hals. And then I went and looked at all of these other really superb pictures that had not gone, ugh, and grabbed me by the throat because of their quality. Never heard of any of these people. Right? All really good artists. No doubt successful in their time, just the way, or to the extent that Rembrandt was. These are all Dutch masters without question, but they're not ones that had got to me, and I'm a freaking art historian.
Yeah.
Right? But those three, those were the ones that said, gooey, I'm over here. And there is just something about me for lack of another word, that's better than the rest. Now, where do we find that better? What does this quality thing mean? Well, when we were talking about masterpieces earlier, well, that's where we say this is an indication that the individual is a master of his medium. Okay, he can do this thing. So there's that, for sure. The quality of the job, the quality of the application. And I want to come back to that idea, the job, the application, the skill of the individual at some point. But there's something else that goes beyond that, which is, the depth of vision that they have, their understanding, something, plus that this is an individual that is taking this art form, that is taking this understanding that we have through art one step further than the people before him, one step along. And it's not towards anything, it's just along. Like the swinging of the art history pendulum is not towards anything. It's back and forth and up and down and in and out. It's transition, but it's those things that drive that transition are the ones that you say, this is an important piece. Because looking back, we see how this contributes to what has happened in art and what has happened in society and so forth. We can do the same thing in technology. You can look at things and say, oh yeah, the punch cards on the Jacquard looms is what leads to programming. At the time, it's just a thing that's going in that direction and building on, and since we're not talking about beauty, we're not talking about that ephemeral quality that art has, we're talking about something very practical. But the same thing happens with technology. And we'll say, okay, here it is. This is the Apple I. Big step, important. It's a computer masterpiece to a certain extent. And you look at that and you say, Steve Wozniak was a genius. He was a genius engineer to build this thing. And then you look at the first punch tapes that Paul Allen and Bill Gates produced and say, these guys are producing a computer masterpiece, and that this is something that's moving this whole bit of technology further on. And so for whoever the first guy that managed to reduce the size of a chip, whose name we don't know, but those engineers, each one of those was producing their own tiny little masterpieces that move this forward. Now, we use those terms in art. We don't use those terms in other fields of society. But nevertheless, that's what they are. Right. And they work in the same way. Now, I was going to say something about the mastery of the medium and that kind of stuff. Because of what you said earlier, Brandt. And what you're saying about, you saw art that touched you, that spoke to you. And it would have been terrible if these people, because they were not yet masters of the medium, didn't make the art, because then you wouldn't have got to see it.
Right.
And that's absolutely true. And in a way, that's, an artist who stopped because they didn't feel like it, or because they didn't think they were good enough. Well, then that person is no artist, as far as I'm concerned, because they're missing the point that you're not fighting other artists to compete with their quality. You're fighting with you to compete with your quality, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that gets lost in commercial art. I think when it's easy as an artist to be consumed by the philosophy that's within commercial art, and to allow that to pollute your own personal artistic goals. And that's probably where that thought came from. Sorry.
Yeah, and no, that's fair enough. No. And I've got several friends who are very, very successful illustrators that I went to college with. And I, still friends on Facebook, and if I ever meet them, if I have the chance to meet them, I'll travel 100 miles to do it, because they're really great guys, But I find myself occasionally, because I was the art professor in my class, and they were all the illustrators, right? I was trying to get to be a better artist, and they were trying to expand their ways of thinking as an illustrator. In many cases, they wanted to get into teaching, which is great. So they ended up talking to me about technique, and I ended up talking to them about class plans.
Okay.
It was a great trade-off.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so they'll have these things, and they will get a piece of non-figurative art or a piece of conceptual art, and there's a slight tendency to say, what is this rubbish, and why do people pay so much money for it, when I'm struggling to get this wonderful portrait accepted for enough money to put my kids through college, for God's sake, which is a lot of money, but I got to do that thing, And I have to say, well, wait on, hang on. Remember, art is art, we're illustrators. That's good, but that shouldn't stop us seeing what the merits of other type of art is.
Yeah.
And in fact, the way that you paint now is as much influenced by the non-figurative action painters as it is by Rembrandt. It's all part of the same progression. It's part of the same lineage. And the fact of the matter is that if you are a representational artist, you can trace your lineage from teacher to teacher. And one of my art historian teachers did this in one of our classes. Literally from the teachers who were teaching us, through their teachers, back through the earliest American artists and people in the 1920s who went to study in Europe and who they studied with and who learned, all the way back to late medieval paintings. And the reason it stops there is because prior to that, people didn't sign their painting and we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And the only reason it stops there is because we don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know who studied with who. But from, 1300 to 2017, there is a lineage of artists who have learned from others artists either directly or indirectly through teachers. It goes all the way back there. And all of the non-figurative artists started as figurative artists. They just, they did different things.
Right.
And so all of that, and as I say, I like to point this out to my friends, the illustrators, who grumble at, why is this piece of graffiti just got $6 million or whatever the hell it is? Why do they pay for this? And the answer to that is because that's what somebody wants to pay for.
Yeah.
And that's what the guy can get for it.
So maybe it's less useful for that very reason, and probably many others. It's not useful to see the merit of a piece of artwork based on whatever value is applied to it monetarily. However, the masterpiece criteria, it's a monetary value, is off the table. But there's a lot of other
there are other
ways to assess the value, and sometimes it corresponds with its monetary value, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't at all. I do think that the correlation between the two are somewhat accidental based on just the attention that a piece is getting. So attention is valuable, and attention is given for things that are monetarily valuable, and attention is given for things that are masterworks.
And it's like a lot of it, it's marketing even.
Yeah, marketing is a huge part. I I was in Paris last year, and of course I went to the Louvre, and there's more pieces of work in that. You could spend 6 months there, going daily, and still have a hard time seeing everything. But most people seem to be making a beeline for the Mona Lisa.
Of course. But here's the funny thing about the Louvre, of course, you could spend 6 months there looking at wonderful art and never even go to the museum. Never look at it once.
Yeah, it's true.
Avoid the crowd, go somewhere else. And if it was the thing that turned you on, just go down to the Egyptian room.
Yeah.
Oh.
We did a very...
Crumbs.
I was so happy that I did a little bit of research beforehand, and I decided when I saw how much work there was and I saw the layout of the building, I said I want a tour. We only have a couple hours that day, and I want someone who really knows what they're doing to show us and give us backstory, because I know a little bit about art history because I studied art, but it's still fairly minimal. Honestly, my knowledge is fairly minimal, and I was there with it was our honeymoon, our late honeymoon, and my wife loves art, but she's not an art historian either, and so we went on this tour with a lady who had actually studied art history at the Louvre, because it's also a school.
Yes.
And she gave us so much history just even on the building itself, and it was I loved it. I loved that tour, and I loved the tour guide, and she arranged the tour in such a way that the Mona Lisa was kind of at the end, because it was sort of the headliner. But I've never really been that big a fan of headliners. I'm often there for the opening act, and so I was so glad that she took us through all of these special little places and showed us the old building before the Renaissance.
Yeah,
and
you and me, buddy. One of the first concerts I went to in Seattle with my wife. My wife got the tickets was because Iris Dement was the first act, and I didn't even remember who the second act was because we didn't bother to wait.
You didn't bother to wait, yeah.
Because she was the one I wanted to see.
Yeah,
and,
that happens
and,
often.
and okay, really, really sappy country music with the most phenomenal voice. And so we went and listened to that. John Prine, that's right. And we sat through a bit of that, and then they did a duet, and I said, okay, I've had enough, let's go.
Yeah. And
Because,
she was okay
headliners,
with that. She was okay with that because she was there for the music that you wanted to see as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's nice when that works out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But but you see, situation like that is, in all fairness, I like to tease art historians because of my experience with art historians that don't understand artists, right? And the fact that I've taught art history,
Right.
but because I'm an artist first and an art history historian somewhere like about fifth, I always used to say I have the vampire's approach to art history. How much can I suck out of this guy's work that I can use myself? And the result of this is, I remember getting I guess it must have been an email, which makes it pretty early on in my career, as email from one of my students who'd been up to London and gone, I guess, to the Tate or something, and they said they went through the Impressionist section, and she said, Professor Becker, you've completely changed my understanding of what this is. I used to hate this stuff. But I went and I looked at it, remembering what you said. And she said, this is phenomenal. I love it. It's not what I thought it was at all.
No.
I said, yes! And from my point of view, it's because, for me, I was teaching art history to artists. And it's always the WTF. What am I trying to do with these people? Not make them love the art history, make them love the artists, make them love the art so that they can get what they can out of it. I mean, my painting, nothing like Impressionism, but it's phenomenal. And gosh, I learned so much about using color from those suckers, And the thing about it is, and that works in computer games too.
It does.
Because it works everywhere. And so your tour guide there was a person who fell in love with the art, learning the art history, because that's where she was, and that was her art. And that, And the backstory is great. The backstory is great. But it's interesting because visual art, traditional painting, which is what we're talking about to a certain extent, but it's true of sculpture, it's true of a whole lot of things, it's true of architecture, is of course silent. Unless you already know its backstory, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember this
In fact,
happened
sorry to interrupt, but when you're in a critique, they prefer not to know it.
Yeah.
They would like to look at the work,
Yeah.
and then as soon as you start to explain it, they say, it should speak for itself.
Yeah.
So,
Well, my line was always, every word you say is a nail in the coffin. If you have to tell me,
spoken like someone who spent a lot of time in the classroom teaching.
If you have to,
I had all this other work I had to do, and I stayed up real late working on this. And
and it shows. Doesn't it just show?
Showed that all the brushstrokes
Yeah. You
after 2
say,
a.m.
yeah. Do yourself a favor, buddy. Shut up. Exactly, because it's silent, and it works or it doesn't work. And as I say, the thing about the masterpiece is the thing that it's still working 500 years later. And if you look at Greek sculpture and you say, okay, this is working 2,300 years later, that's pretty phenomenal. That's real long endurance. It's pretty superb.
that all ties back to the concept of like the old saying that you had, or maybe it was Abbott, but you're lying to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And if you tell a truth, it's going to be just as true in the future as it is right now.
Yeah. And the quote is, the art is a lie that's told to tell the truth, is attributed to Picasso, but I'm not sure if it's even true or not. But it doesn't really matter, because
it's still true.
The truth that art tells is sometimes different than the way that
okay, so here's my sketchbook, and there's very few drawings in here, or is this one with no drawings in it? Okay, no, this one with virtually no drawings in it. That's a funny one to pick up. Oh no, here we go. So any of these any decent at all? Okay, so no, these are just these.
It's all right. We're not here for critique.
Not here for critique. Okay, so here's a
Remember
picture,
the nails in the
three-quarters view from the back of a woman with short hair, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what it is. This is not a three-quarters view of a woman from the back with short hair. No, it's a series of pencil marks on a piece of paper.
Right.
Right. And it will never ever be anything except a series of pencil marks on a white piece of paper. The fact that we can look at it and see a woman's face and, you know, her hair and her ears and everything, that's representation. That's representational art. That's what it does. The fact that somewhere very early on in our history, we realized that we could do this. That by producing a series of patterns on a flat surface, we could make people see space. We could convince people so much that they're walking towards the doorway that they will walk into the wall, because right until that point where they slam on the brakes, they still think that it leads them outside. That we can trompe l'oeil, we can fool the eye, you know, which is just so bizarre. But what's more is we can do it with minimal marks, minimal information, but still see all of it. And then we can do that and present them with an emotion in what we've drawn that creates an emotion in themselves. As I always did say, and this one you did get from me, it's through the eye, straight to the heart, bypassing the brain. You know, and the fact that we can do this, and then here is the thing that, for me, you know, because we were talking earlier about, you made a comment, you think the art is moving more in this direction, and, you know, we're getting back to representation, but in a different way, and we like
periods in history that reflect where we're going.
Yeah, periods of history that reflect where we're going. So we like the Renaissance because that that clicks with us, and
It's
so
kind
forth.
of like a taste thing, rather.
Yeah. And it's not just a taste, but because it's performing the same kind of function that we want our art to do. And that's why, you know, my friends who are illustrators find that they're actually picking up on the amount of work that they want because of this thing. You see, the camera is great, and the mocap saves so much time, and the animation is superb. And so when you go and see, I don't know, Deadpool, this absolutely appalling story makes you laugh because of the way it's presented. You know, the form completely overrides the content.
Yeah, that's true.
In such a superb way. You know, that you go to the and you say, you know, this is wonderful. This is a 3D wraparound live action comic book, and it's still a freaking comic book. And remember the word comic in that. You know, all that is really great, and we like that, the capacity to present a really nice verisimilitude of reality. We like representation of reality. But you know what? I'll ask you guys a hypothetical. If you got the option to have, say, some original sketches, pick your favorite Disney cartoon, hand-drawn, 2D.
Sword in the Stone.
Sword in the Stone. If you got the chance to have some of the original layout drawings, or the one of the frames, the original blue pencil stuff to own, but for that you could never watch the movie again, which would you have?
I would choose the drawing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen the movie so many times.
Yeah. And it keeps being the same movie, and it's great, but that drawing.
That drawing, though, the important thing to note there is that you already have the emotional connection to the story.
Yeah.
And looking at that drawing will evoke that story.
Yeah, you don't need
the
the story anymore because you got the drawing.
And there's also a part of it too where when something is, when you've seen it so young and so many times, the story is already, when you watch the movie again, you're seeing it with only your own eyes and no longer seeing it as you would the first time, or but
it's an interesting thing you see about story. One of the things about story, about drama, if you think about the origin of drama in Greek theater, is they always knew what the story was before they went in.
Yeah.
You know, they already knew what the story is. You knew how it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
It always turned out the same way.
They enjoy participating in a familiar story.
Yeah.
Right?
And they enjoyed the process of the presentation. They enjoyed the form of theater. And this is something that when I guess second year sophomore liberal arts student doing art history, creative writing, English lit, boy was I ever a liberal arts major, talking about the effect of catharsis. That theater is there for catharsis, to clear the spirit of the audience, of the dread, the problems that are summed up in the tragic hero. You know,
and that's so true of even like stand-up comedy.
Even
right, it's so similar.
Yes, that's right. The thing that people miss about stand-up comedy is that's what you actually go there for.
Yeah,
you know,
and
because we don't use a word like catharsis. You know, we don't think that we need that kind of release, that moment of self-forgiveness, the burning off of sin, or whatever you want to call it, you know, that gives. We don't, but we still have it. It's still part of the human nature that we need that. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's interesting is that you see the single drawing now, because it's connected with all of that.
Yeah.
It evokes the whole of the story. And what's more is you got a part of the story.
Yeah.
You got a part of the story behind the story. You got, what's more, a handmade part of that. And I think one of the things that sort of is running contrary to the mocap, running contrary to big game production and all of that kind of stuff, is that people like to have something that is actually made, and if possible, that allows them the connection with the artist. And I'm sorry for our friends, the programmers, but nobody is going to care to have your typed up piece of code, no matter what part of the proceedings it does.
No, I will say...
there may be nutters out there that do.
I will say, on the flip side, I was just gushing to Brandt and his wife Anne earlier today about how I still own my very first computer.
Yeah, but that's sort of a novelty, or not a novelty, but it's a part of your past.
Well, and it's a part of my past. It's got a very personal relationship.
Well, as far as that's concerned, up until very recently, I still owned my very first pair of lederhosen. But when I realized that they were just beginning to, the seams were beginning to rot, and they smelled of mildew, and I had a new pair, I said, okay, I don't need to keep these anymore.
I don't play games as intensely as I used to, though. There is one game in the recent past that I've played and felt, close connection with in a way that I felt when I was much younger. And John and I talked about it just today, roping him back into playing it with me. And it doesn't matter what it is, but it's Overwatch, just for context.
Hey, no buzz marketing.
Sorry. Don't take this podcast down, please. I mentioned the O word. But I have a lot of coworkers and friends who will, when they have a favorite movie or a favorite game, they will seek out these collectible items that they can decorate their homes or offices with. And I've never been that kind of person. But last week or 2 weeks ago, I found myself sort of browsing Blizzard's store, looking at the different figurines they had, because I wanted something physical that I could have at my workspace that would kind of connect me with how I feel about the whole experience of playing it. So part of it is the artwork. A big part of it is the artwork.
Yeah.
And
so these three, they have names?
It's the characters.
Give me a character name.
Tracer.
Tracer.
Yeah.
So you there will have your shrine to Saint Tracer.
Yeah, exactly.
Or perhaps the goddess Tracer.
It is.
Or the god Tracer.
And I would prefer May, but they don't have a figurine of her yet.
Yeah.
Tracer is like the main one. So
yeah. So there you go. But later on you can have the side altar to Saint
May. Yeah.
People work that way, and of course,
true.
Tongue in cheek.
I want a totem. I want a totem. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it is a bit to show allegiance, because I'm in a space where a lot of people have these figurines. Not a lot. It's probably like more than in a normal office job. But then when people come by, they know where my allegiance lies because they see my totem.
My roommate that I have now at my apartment is a gentleman by the name of Ryan Frost, who just moved up here. He graduated from what's the animation school down south in the Florida area? I can't remember the name of it right now. Ringling.
Yeah.
He works for Funko.
Yeah, I have some previous students of mine work for Funko.
He is a sculptor for Funko, and that is a company that they make specifically what Brandt is looking for.
Yeah. So they have one of May, and it's only $15. So there's some more product placement for you.
But there's
you should also ask Ryan if he knows Amanda Brock and Shelley Rapalai because
They all know each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he probably sits next to them. Sorry.
But so
Go on.
the thing is, like, this is a company that is built from the ground up specifically to make totems of geek and nerddom fandom,
yeah.
so that every single person can look back and be like, you know what I loved as a kid? I loved the Labyrinth,
Yeah. Oh,
and now
man.
I can have a Jareth totem,
Yes,
right
yes.
on my desk,
Right on your desk.
And
yeah.
they're
And-
making a new series for the Dark Crystal, and that's going to be
Yeah.
right down, like, I'm there. I'm
Yeah,
buying the products
absolutely.
already.
And if anybody needed any figures of swallows and Amazons, I would have Captain Nancy right there waving her flag. Because, which is weird because it's not even my childhood. I was in my 20s by then. It's a kid's
Yeah.
book, But that's the thing. Yes, we do that thing, and which, by the way, John, you've helped me understand to a certain extent a phenomenon which I could not understand in the slightest. Some years back, I remember going into a comic store, and they had all of these little character figures and things. And I looked at these kind of mushy things, and I asked the clerk, so what comic is this from? I said, oh, they're by so-and-so. And I said, yeah, but are they from a comic? I said, no, they're just character figures. I said, character figures without a story? That's right. And I thought, what is the point of that? But I understand, and I think it's part of what we're saying. People want totems.
Yeah.
And there was this thing, so that there are characters, and people would design characters. Well, okay, the character never got a story, it never got a comic book, but it was a nice looking character. So here's your totem. You can make him anybody you jolly well want.
No, here. Oh yeah. Here's the thing, though, is
And they were by this
you,
artist who was known for these kind of characters that looked like they weren't any story.
The way you tell that story, though, it makes you sound like the Grinch who stole Christmas. They did it without boxes.
Well, probably because, like the Grinch, I didn't get it. But you've helped me understand, and that
Today his heart grew
after
three
a while I said,
sizes.
yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't going to rain on their parade. I just thought, now that is, and it is a salutary lesson to learn from time to time, which is, there are people out there that believe stuff, and I just don't know where they're coming from. I am. Nope, just not picking up that vibe. But it's okay.
true.
You
Yeah,
can
it's
do
kinda
that.
okay, yeah.
You can do that. It's allowed.
And I think
because it mustn't be forbidden.
I think it's
Right.
also, there's so many different beliefs and values and things. If you understood everyone equally as well, you probably wouldn't retain your own vantage point on your own, you wouldn't retain your own perspective, I don't think, because to be able to identify with every interest, I mean, there is something about...
I don't know. I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong because right now, speaking of beliefs, right, for lack of any other, right now, since I'm a kind of Zen Buddhist pagan who's beginning to have an understanding of why Christians act like they do, and I hope that's not making me less of an artist.
I think...
Because central to everything I believe is art,
Mm-hmm.
central to everything I believe, is that I think what we do when we make art is invaluable. By which I mean both you cannot put a price on it and it's impossible to know what it's worth. Right? Because we make totems for geeks, because we make icons for true believers, because we build cathedrals and make figures and things that 500 years or 1,000 years or 20,000 years later still can move the viewer. I think that's something that makes us essentially human.
Yeah.
And all of that is in fact still in there, which is back to where we began, was why you have to have art studios, you have to have art schools where people are messy, because the business of being a human is messy, and the business of being an artist is being human, and therefore is messy, and that you can't make all the monitors line up. It's okay if you do that at night when you're pushing the sweeper through, but by golly, next morning somebody's going to come in and turn the thing around. And if you try to stop him, shame on you.
Well, I was
because you're a Philistine.
I was teaching a class recently where we did it wasn't a still life, but it was an exercise where they draw a model that has the planes of the face, and we were doing it in Photoshop, so we're in a computer lab, and I had set up two stations where they could draw it because it's difficult for everyone to see the same figure in a computer lab, right?
Yeah.
They're all in rows, they're not in a circle, there's these giant machines in the way. And I've stressed out a lot about how to arrange it, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
there are only 10 students in the class, but no one wants, like no class, everyone sits in the first two rows. Everyone's all spread out and everything. So anyway, I brought in a second stand and I set it all up. And then we had a break between the lecture and the exercise. And I came back and someone in the second row had taken all the unused monitors in the first row and laid them down on the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I thought, what a great idea. Like someone sort of took charge of the space. They realized what we were doing and what we would need, and they took action. And
There's your A student right there.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And on top of that, I could see someone very concerned about the workspace being upset that the monitors were face down, like on the keyboards or something. And I think that in a very small way, the workspace was becoming a little less tidy and a little bit better for artists.
Yes,
Yeah.
more of a studio and less of a classroom. I remember walking into a classroom which is essentially like that. I looked around and sort of turned around and went back and found Maya, whoever did this. Why did you put me in that classroom? What am I supposed to do in there? Did you know what class this is?
Oh,
You can't teach that class like that.
yeah.
Give me. I don't care about chairs. Give me empty space.
Right.
You know, I don't care if it's a lecture class. They can stand up.
Yep.
I stand up.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
meanwhile, I have to go and make sure the tablet drivers are working and make sure the projector is working, and half the time it's not, and there's just all of these things. But then I realized that if none of it worked, I could still teach.
Yeah.
Like I could still teach. I have enough information, and maybe they couldn't do the exercise on the tablets that day, but like we would get by,
Yeah.
right? It would work. And if the second week they don't have it set up, then we move to another room and we just tell the office later that we moved, right? Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
Becker's holding a pencil and paper here, so
yeah, right. And this, by the way, yeah. Here's the sketchbook. Notice
it's a nubbin.
it's a nubbin. There's only good drawings left in this. All the bad ones are gone. So I in my mini and varied career, I taught a class in text. What do they call it?
Typography?
Typography.
Yeah.
Class in thank you very much. A class in typography, and did the whole schmear theoretical stuff, that smattering of history, and then went on to talk, parts of the letter, ascenders, descenders, voids, all of these kinds of things, and then talked about different types of fonts, what they use for, blah blah blah, the whole thing. And the first job, which is really the important part of what this class was for most of the students who were taking it. Okay, we're going to design you a business card.
Right.
And what I want you to do for homework next week is to bring me in, because it's me, 50 designs, just roughs, pencil on paper. You can do it on a piece of lined paper. Doesn't matter. Please remember that the size is 2.13 by 4, whatever the inches are. It's damn close to Fibonacci relationship here, and go for it and just play with it. And so and I came into the studio, into the classroom, which was a computer classroom. It's interesting because what they did there is they arranged them sort of in U-shaped rows so that you can stand in front of one and look down.
That would be much better.
And then look down this one. And so I just sort of wander around, and so all they had to do was turn it 90 degrees from their monitor to look at me, right? And there was a guy working on a computer. I said, "Oh, but I'm doing your homework." I said, "But you're using a computer." He said, "Yeah, I'm much quicker on a computer." And I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Oh, I am. I'm much quicker on a computer." I said, "Yeah, but the trouble is, you see, the computer is going to seduce you into believing that what you've done is good because it looks finished."
Yeah, that's true.
And we argued back and forth about this. And I said, okay, I'm going to let you win. But I tell you this, the homework, when I actually ask you to do the end project on this, it's going to be like all the other ones. And yeah, I know the assignment will have your name on it, but you put your name on the back so I don't know whose work I'm looking at. Well, it'll have their name, but it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to mark you just the same as everybody else. And he got a C-.
Yeah.
And he got a C- because his work wasn't very good. And he got a C minus because all they did was move the same elements around.
Yeah.
He didn't rethink the problem once.
And so this is why, even though I teach people vector tools and shape tools in Photoshop, I make them draw everything. They draw everything with the tablet, and people resist it at first because they're used to the cleanliness that a computer creates, and then they draw and they see how messy it is. But what they don't realize is that the quality doesn't lie in the finish. The quality lies in the idea. Really, it's the idea. And drawing something out.
First concept, then first idea,
garbage,
then
concept,
then concept, then form, then detail.
It's so important, and it's something that I forget and remember on a weekly basis because.
As do we all.
Yeah, because I will say, like, so say I'm drawing a building in like a 3-dimensional perspective, and I know because it has to be a building that's in this city at this period in time. I know the basic architecture, and I say, okay, well, I could draw this out and then come up with the idea and then redraw it later, or I could use this very precise tool that selects and masks and then create the perfect value in the beginning right from the start, right? So I know that it has this nice finished look before I draw it out. And I think, well, I know the architecture fairly well, so I'll just skip the first step. Every time it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you think you know it, but then there's all these small, not small, but there's these things that are these design elements that are easily forgettable, but have a great impact on the finished product that you totally gloss over. You have this nicely polished piece of crap that you then have to redraw from scratch and go back.
Anyway, you're still going to do that. Yeah, as you were saying, Jenny. First of all, you started as you got a pile of garbage.
Yeah, like. If you're just starting with predefined elements and you're just moving them around, you never let go of that first idea.
No.
You just sit with that first idea. It's like, it's one thing if you're working on a 24-hour deadline, that's one thing. But if you have the time, if you are being asked to do this thing and you have the time to do it properly, just do it correctly.
Yeah.
Like, grab a pencil, grab a piece of paper, get your 50 crap ideas out of the way, and then you start to do interesting stuff.
Yeah, because when you've completely run out of those first ideas, so you're really struggling to come up with something, then you come up with something new.
It's only at the moment where you become your most frustrated when you start to become truly creative.
Yeah, or as we used to say to you all the time, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Well, that 50 drawings are all in your comfort zone. That's why they're the 50 first ones.
Yeah.
And the first one that nudges you out of that, because out of desperation, you try something else. Yeah, that's the one that's moving you on. And
it's for that reason that I've always enjoyed the teapot assignment.
Yeah,
it's such an iconic assignment.
You and you alone.
I love the teapot. No, this is the teapot. You task a person with one simple concept. I want 50 or 100 pages of teapots. 4 drawings per page.
Go. Yeah.
Go. You have a week to do it. And it starts off simple enough. A person has a teapot. Or maybe they have a conceptual teapot. They have a teapot in their head and they start drawing teapots. And if they're not a creative person, they stop there.
Yeah.
And they just draw 50 teapots.
Yeah.
If you are a creative person, you start finding things you can say about the teapot, or different ways of representing a teapot, or scenarios a teapot could be in, or something that has nothing to do with teapots, but then there's a teapot.
Yeah, exactly. And in a funny kind of way, John, I think if in the right circumstances, you end up moving through the whole art history pendulum in one assignment.
You could
because you think about
true.
naturalistic teapots, you
That's
think
true.
about abstract teapots, you think. All of these things.
I mean, if you're doing it the night before it's due, then you do nothing but abstract teapots.
Yes. But you know something I find, here's a notion for you though, John. In all the times I've given that assignment, I've never yet had anyone decorate the teapot.
Really?
It's always just teapots.
It's just a teapot, just a blank.
There's never like a teapot that has a picture of a space launch on the surface of the teapot.
No, they never use the teapot as something to use.
Oh man,
Someone.
Oh,
I mean,
so
the teapot
the
teapot has turned into a character.
yeah.
It's turned into a hot air balloon. It's done all of these.
But there's
things.
never like a tea time where someone's using a teapot to pour tea. No, that is so. That's golden.
Yes, or a teapot with flowers on it, a teapot with with stripes or anything. Just they're all plain. And they the really smart ones will go and look at teapots, and then so they'll have cylindrical teapots, and they'll have the Brown
they've
Betty,
looked at different
the
kinds,
iconic Brown Betty,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
or the one from whatever that program is that builds a teapot.
Yeah, Max, that
the
has the
Max
default
they'll
teapot.
draw that. But they never think of actually doing anything to the surface of the teapot.
So the
which always, as a potter, that amuses the heck out of me.
So the last time I did the assignment,
How many times did you do this assignment?
more than once, less than a dozen.
Yeah.
I was telling my mom walked in on me and she said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm drawing teapots." And she walks away, and about an hour later, she's like, "John, come out to the dining room." Go out to the dining room, and on the dining room table, she has lined up a dozen teapots of various shapes and sizes and designs.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Will this help you?"
And of course, she was absolutely right.
My mom studied art.
I actually didn't know because she's not doing art. I never knew that she studied it.
When my mom was much younger, she wanted to be a jeweler.
Oh, okay.
So she grew up in a house. Her mother was a rose mauler, and her father was a painter.
So you have a very creative family because you're an artist and your brother is a musician.
And my other brother's a mechanic.
Yeah. Well,
He's my half brother. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Aaron, I love you very much.
he's only half as cool.
Cool in a different way, because you got to remember how much we owe to mechanics.
Oh my
the
God.
whole concept, the whole bleed nipple concept,
Yes.
which leads us to the essential question of WTF, because of trying to be a mechanic.
Yes.
the whole idea.
I owe everything to my brother. If it weren't for him, I would still have a bashed out window in the side of my car right now.
Yeah, right. And that's worth a great deal. Yeah, but there's a little aside for you. Yes, both of my daughters are artists. One's a painter, and she does all kinds of illustrative pictures and portraiture and so forth. And basically, she does commission work, and she does work for herself. And right now, she decided, because she just had her first child, my second granddaughter. And being an artist and a mom at the same time is really hard. She needed a manageable project to go on. So basically, she's drawing flowers. She's doing little pen and watercolor illustrations of flowers, just as she comes across them and whatever's in season and so forth. They're absolutely beautiful. Well, one of her friends is very much into folklore and things like that, and so her idea is, okay, I'm going to take all of Allie's illustration, I'm going to write up the folklore of each of these things, and we'll do like a little deck of cards or something that's about the folklore of the flowers. Just because the art's being done, let's do something with the art.
Right.
And number one daughter is a tattoo artist, because she discovered that's something she could really do. And she discovered this, and both of you will really appreciate this. Having done her 10,000 hours in art before she decided she wanted to do tattoo, she is one shit hot tattooist. Because, as she said, most people decide they want to be a tattooist, and they learn how to
when they learn
tattoo
to do
while
art.
they're
Yeah.
trying to learn art. And who's going to be sitting there trying, reproducing somebody else's art on somebody's back,
it's like
and then
starting
go home and practice drawing teapots, when in fact what they need to do is draw 500 teapots.
It's kind of like
with a
someone
dozen examples.
who decides they want to be in a band and learn the instrument at the same time. It goes much slower. It takes a long time.
I mean,
Yes,
it
and
can
the other
still be
band
done.
members hate you.
yeah, they really do.
It can still be done.
It can be
It
done.
can be done, but
Yeah. Well, to a certain extent, if you think about it, junior and senior projects in any kind of animation course
my God.
is like that. Where
Yeah,
you're still
it is.
learning how to play the instrument, now you're working in a band.
yeah.
I think back to junior year at Digipen, and they ask these people to make a 3D animation with a character, animate the character, and have them go through the scenario, and you have 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Most of us had never worked in 3D before that. Most of us had never obviously rigged or animated a character in 3D before that. And we were still expected to do this. And by the way, you had 4 months to do it.
Yeah. So I find that the best approach to make something successful in that, with that set of criteria, is to imagine that if someone wasn't given the tools of 3D and was just given a camera and said, like, you have to make a compelling story,
Mm-hmm.
what the best project would be. I mean, you could make a compelling story out of just filming spoons or something. If each of the spoons had character and there was conflict and you had like something charming happen, you wouldn't need any of the tools. So I imagine that the best, like, I was no good at 3D, but I feel like if you understand what gets people interested in stories, you can actually kind of skip a lot of the technical requirements.
That's essentially what Jim Johnson, of course, was trying to do in the filmmaking class. And one of the difficulties of teaching is to get the students to understand that what you learn in this class is not for this class; it's for what comes next and later.
Yeah.
That every class is a foundation for everything else, and. Yeah, you got to draw a whole lot of boxes in Art 101. That's because you have to understand three-dimensional space. Mm-hmm. And if you cannot think yourself your way around a box in three-dimensional space while you're drawing it, you're hopeless. You're never going to get it. If you cannot understand that what ends up on the screen is in fact just as two-dimensional as you're drawing, you're missing the inherent problem that you're trying to deal with here. And so, yeah, he taught about storytelling, and I always thought that one of the most useful exercises he had was the short film of still images.
Oh, I love those assignments.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great.
Those are great.
And that's and that's the way you do that. And in fact, all of that is what you need to be able to do. My own thinking about that is, well, it's kind of summed up with the situation I've got now. I've had a student come back to me to ask me to teach them, right? Because very, very good artist, did okay in animation, did pass, graduated Digipen and like that. But she wants to do an MA. She wants to get into teaching, basically. She wants to teach art. And she will be a phenomenal art teacher. And I want to tell you a story about her in a minute. Just as an aside, John, have you ever seen any of my blogs?
I like reading your blog, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, you know the story about I've been lied to? That was one of my sermons.
No, I let me clarify. I just started reading your blog.
Okay, so it's a little bit further back. So I'll tell the story in just a minute. Anyway, this student has come to me because she wants to learn graphic design. And as always, I said, yeah, I can teach you that. You taught me about just about anything, and I say, well, I can teach you the foundations, or yeah, I can teach you that, right? Because, my holy trinity of form, function, and medium is also design, is craftsmanship, design, art. It's the same, right?
Yeah, okay.
The difference between fine art and design is in fine art you're thinking more about the form than you are about the functionality. The difference between design and craftsmanship is in craftsmanship you're thinking about the medium more than the design. But they all have to fit together, I said, yeah, I can teach you that because the foundational rules are the same, right? Anyway, she wants to. I'm trying to remember how we got onto this.
She wants to be an art teacher.
She wants to be an art teacher. Yeah, she wants to be an art teacher, but she needs to be able to get an advanced degree, and she thinks she'd be able to get work, and she'd be able to get onto a higher degree if she can do graphic design. Mm-hmm. And it all sort of boiled down to the same thing: is that if you go to any, as far as I'm aware, and I may be being unkind to one of the colleges around here. If you go to any of the colleges around here to learn graphic design, they will teach you how to use Photoshop and Illustrator.
Yeah.
And that's what they'll teach you.
Yes.
And anything you learn about graphic design, you pick up on the way. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the old days, they used to teach you how to use a pencil and paper and how to do graphic design, and then you learn later how to use a program.
No, I will. To be fair, I did date someone a while back who was taking a graphic design course at Central Washington University, and they, on at least 2 separate occasions, had to do a foam core assignment.
Oh, I am so glad to hear this. Yeah, because
listening to her curse under her breath in the middle of the night, changing blades.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know about foam core. I mean,
yes, we do.
Yeah, don't we just and mounting card? Yes.
So I will be fair about that.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. So props to Central. That's really excellent to hear, and they're on the right track because in fact, it's like you just said. You're going to do this, and you know how to do it in the program, but you're going to do a pencil drawing beforehand.
Yeah.
If you can't do the pencil drawing beforehand, well, that's going to make the whole thing different.
Yeah.
It's exactly like, okay, give me layouts for your business card. If you can't do it with a pencil, the program is not going to help you do it.
And I think that's...
And she knows that what she's going to do is get a really high training in using programs. And that brings me back to the junior project, because I've always thought the real way around that, and goodness knows they got enough money from their students, was at the end of sophomore year, when you're basically transitioning from traditional media into electronic media full time. At the end of sophomore year, you should be given a laptop with all the programs on it, right? With the books, or already loaded onto the program, onto the laptop, tutorials to learn those programs, and say, okay, this summer you've got this summer to learn all these programs, and we expect you to reach, lesson 17 in all of them before you come back. And you spend the whole summer learning the program, so that when you come back, you're not learning the program at the same time that you're trying to use the program.
Right.
I can teach you how to use a pencil in 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I can teach you how to be good with a pencil in 15 weeks.
Right.
But if you don't know whether you stick it in your ear or up your nose when we begin, it's really going to be hard.
And I've noticed the exact same issue in education, because I'm teaching an introduction. It's a digital painting class, CG 201. It's also, it combines things that you learn in tone, color, and composition with learning Photoshop. But the truth is that very few people are done learning tone, color, and composition when they finish that. No one's done.
Not.
No one's done.
No one's
learning.
done.
So what I've done with the class is I've divided it into 3 sections, and each the beginning of each section is an assignment that is rooted in a traditional approach. So still life, plein air, figure drawing. And then the second week is a study of successful artists that do the thing that we're about to do, which is for the still life section, it's prop design. For the plein air, it's environment design. And for the figure drawing, it's character design. We just do studies of the artists. And then the final one, you get to final week in each section, you get to design your own prop, environment, or character. Now, it's way too much work.
I'm going to say
it's way too much work in the sense that there's too many concepts. Like the physical work is not that great, but the concepts are still that great, and are still too great. And I think your solution of teaching them the tools, getting that out of the way, and then focusing on the concepts in the class would be far superior. Also, it extends the duration of the educational experience. That's part of the issue.
That's why Art 101 was a 3-credit course that lasted 5 hours.
And it should.
Because we cheated. We simply cheated. And I remember someone complaining about the fact that it was a 5-hour course, but they only got 3 credits. I said, but that means you get 2 hours for free.
I mean, anyone who is paying their own way through college is probably like, please and thank you.
Please and thank you. Yes. And there's your A student.
I mean, therein lies another problem, is that, once again, this is the reason you would also want to get the laptop with the software, because the reason Art 101 exists is because we don't have sufficient art education before you start college. Exactly. People need to start learning somewhere.
You have to start learning somewhere, and it does seem to me a little bit invidious to teach classes in how to use the tool. I mean, shoot. I learned blacksmithing, believe it or not, when I was an art student majoring in ceramics, because one of the technicians was a smith.
Okay.
Right? And I was doing silversmithing as my minor. And so I said, okay, I understand the concept, because I had to learn all of this for using precious metals in a very small scale. So how does this work? And this guy basically gave me blacksmithing 101 and 201, Now the result of that is, when I actually started working at the college, they needed somebody to make tools for the glass blowing department, and to repair tools for and I could do that because I could go out on the friggin' forge and make them. but that's the thing. Again, paying my own way. I was there to learn as much as I friggin' could, and here, wait a minute, they got forges?
Yeah.
They got forges? How cool is that? And because it seems to me that learning how to use the tools on course time, there's something wrong with that idea. There's something wrong with the formula. It doesn't work like that. I remember one of the teachers back in AIS saying, he was a guru. He was a Photoshop guru, and he would teach all of his tips and tricks. I said, yeah, but isn't the class environmental design or graphic design or something? I said, isn't this supposed to be about page layout?
Yeah.
No, it was all about photo manipulation using this tool. And that's what you're talking about. And many of them, it's quite useful. But I still remember, right, one of the students working with this guy, the guru, coming up and said, okay, so I've got this thing, I made this poster about Fremont, and I can't get the red enough. I said, this is absolutely, this is as red as I can get it off the
because they don't understand.
And I looked and I said, well, here's what you want to do, is you need to bring up this yellow, and you need to get rid of this back there and make it green.
Yeah.
And I said, why? Then your red will look red. It's color theory.
Yeah. But what he was looking at was the saturation.
Yeah.
In the meter on the interface,
right.
saying it's 100% red.
Oh,
Dragged it all the way to the right.
Yeah.
I have got to tell you, you will appreciate this. Actually, you will both appreciate this even more than my other friends I've told. So, situation is not important, but there's this young fella, I guess he's probably working at Microsoft or something or other. Nice fella, Indian. And we were out eating ramen. And he said, so tell me, when you think about color, do you think in hex? I said, what do you mean? I mean, how do you think of color?
I think in eyeball.
I think in hex. And I said, I'm not even going to have this conversation because you're not talking about color.
Yeah, they're talking about the tool, right? It's the tool. Yeah.
I said, now what you're doing has got nothing to do with color.
It's like talking about that.
You're talking about red as in like a symbol of red,
yes,
as opposed to talking about red as in red.
Yes, and what's more, you think that this is red.
He's pointing at my shirt,
which has got nice red lining, and this isn't.
Yeah.
Because you call this brown, you don't realize that in fact it's a very desaturated red.
Kind of dark red.
Because it has wonderful overtones of purple in it.
It's funny things about colors.
Because I mix all my clothes together when I wash them.
Funny thing about colors like brown and pink is they don't have a spot on the color wheel.
Yeah.
It's dependent on how far you go in and out on saturation levels, rather than you don't you don't go left or right.
The thing is, of course, it's set up as a color wheel, but digital color, right? Additive color is not a wheel; it's a cone.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And subtractive color isn't a wheel; it's a cylinder.
Yeah. When I teach the cylinder, because I feel like it's more relevant to how we see biologically. And I should specify too, brown and pink are on the color wheel, but in the traditional one that's just one ring, without the levels of tint and shade, there is. John is just covering his face.
The thing is, like, I would love for someone to give me angry emails. That'd be great.
For anyone to be motivated towards anger.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a brief break and run downstairs to use the bathroom.
I actually think that this is a good point
to
call it.
Yeah.
Because once again we have eluded official interview, but I feel like we have been left with something far greater.
In which case, I want to finish off with the story of my student who has found herself teaching, because I think. Because for me, it is why teach art. So this is specifically for you. Okay. So she's teaching a sort of junior to lower, middle school lower, right, kids, in a sort of private institution. And essentially it's kind of advanced level coloring is what it amounts to. But
can we pause for a second, edit this back in? Because I really have to use the bathroom. I feel like my back teeth are floating right now.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll be back in I'm like right down.
Yeah, okay, run.
I'll be back. I apologize.
Yeah, no
Two
worries.
glasses of wine and a full beer.
No worries. Yeah. And that's the wonderful wonder of editing. What you and I say now will have no relevance in the rest of the world.
I mean, I might put it somewhere.
Yeah.
I have
As always, you've completely avoided what we were supposed to be doing.
Hey, I said this to Brandt before you got here. I figured that there was a good chance we would never get to any questions I had laid out, but it's guaranteed to be a wonderful afternoon.
How could it be bad? How could it be bad, Jonathan? I mean, really.
No, you love telling stories, and I love listening to your stories.
and somewhere, and of course, they all weave through the center of the subject anyway.
Well, that was the other thing too. Is like I didn't at the very beginning of this conversation, I was like, oh, and I was trying to say, and that ties into what I was going to ask you, but then we kept going with the story, and I'd say probably about 30 minutes in, I was listening, and I'm thinking, well, hell, we're talking about art theory, and we're talking about art history, and we're talking about teaching art. So essentially, we're doing what I wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
And formalizing this in any way is not going to improve it.
It's not going to make it any necessarily better. Though I doubt not that we've missed some things. It would be good to come back.
I mean, I have questions just because I part of the reason I enjoy doing this, specifically the dynamic of you and Brandt, is that you have been teaching for a long time, and he kind of stumbled his way into teaching as well, and he hasn't been doing it as long. And I love the compare, contrast, dichotomy, whatever you want to call it, of the two of you just talking about art. Especially since both of you are people who live art. You're steeped in it. You're drowning in it.
Well, if you go back and look at the blog, right? And there's an about.
By the way, go ahead and say what your blog is, because I love that URL.
Oh yeah, the blog is don'tbeadick.blog. Yes, and I was very, when I went to get the name and to start the blog, I looked and I said, well, this is what I want, and nobody taken it? I couldn't believe it.
I can't believe that. You would have thought Will Wheaton would have taken that.
Yeah, but he didn't. I think he's don'tbeadick.com or something, but I'm .blog, that's fine. And the funniest thing is that I had arrived at this, the concept, don't be a dick, without realizing that this was something that Will Wheaton had said. But anyway, so there's a bit in there which says about, and I guess I was pushed in this direction. What you were saying about teaching for a long time and being steeped in art. Yeah, that's right. And I have a little bit there, and in about, and I talk basically about why I'm doing the blog. And I say, that essentially the story, and it's in there very simply, is that for however many years, it was 20 years or something like that, I taught art. And being an art teacher, part of the job was what in the United Kingdom they refer to as pastoral care. And so students would come and start talking about difficulties with perspective, and we'd end up talking about their perspective on life. Or they'd come in talking about why their assignment would be late, and they'd end up talking about the fact that their father was dying and how are they going to survive. Or people would come in to talk about the trouble that they got with their friends, and we end up discussing value theory because it went both directions.
Right.
And I realized, and as I say, the sort of formative moment is after my last class that I taught there at DigiPen. I was looking through the student forms, student reaction, and somebody had written, Professor Becker is very good, but at times he gets a little preachy. And I said, well, there's a reason for that, Sonny John. And the reason is that I've been a preacher all my life. I've always been a minister, in a way. Remember last time I was wearing my dog collar.
Oh, yes.
And today it was just a bow tie day. But anyway, so when I retired, I decided rather than being an art professor that was a minister, I'd be a minister who was an art person. Who have we got here? Oh, this is my daughter. Excuse me. Hi, can I phone you back in about 10 minutes? Okay, sweetheart, I'll do that. Bye. But, like any good Church of England minister, more or less has to be a Christian. I think any art minister has to be an artist in exactly the same way. You're seeped in it. You can't be anything else.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, I'm an art teacher. What the hell else was I going to do? I can't stop thinking in this way. It's the way that frames the whole of my existence is this business that we call art. And that teaching art, well, I will tell my story now
I
that
have
Brandt is
returned.
back. Now that Brandt is back, I will
Thank
tell
you.
my story because this is a story for a young man who's finding his way and beginning to be a teacher and who's an artist as well. I was just saying that to Brandt my story. Look it up on don'tbeadick.blog about why I call myself an art minister. Is you have to be a minister, then you have to be an artist if you're going to be an art minister. So, yeah, it's just who I am. So anyway, there was my student. And she's teaching this class in advanced coloring, so to speak. They use pastels, so that it's actually quite advanced, if you will. And so she's going around, and there's one of her students, who's I think about 11 or something, who we will call Margaret, is working on something. And Alex, the teacher, comes over and looks and says, "What are you doing, Margaret?" And she says, "I'm coloring the tree." Stupid, And she says, "Yes, I can see that. And what color are you doing it?" "Well, brown." And Alex says, "Come here for a moment, Margaret," and takes her to the window. And they look out the window onto a lovely gray-skied, neutral Seattle day. And she says, "What color is that tree that you see?" And there's a long pause. And Margaret says, "It's gray." And Alex says, "And what color is that tree there?" "It's gray with green bits." "I've been lied to!" Of course, she colored the tree brown because trees are brown, the sky is blue, the grass is green. Leaves are maybe different colors in the autumn. But it's like the red, Do you think in hex? Of course I freaking well don't think in hex. I think in eyeball, as you said, John.
Right. Oh, Brandt said that.
You said that, Brandt. I think in eyeball. Yeah. I look at it and then I say, "Oh, look, there's a tree, and it's at least 20 different shades of green, and there's some deep blues in there, and some pretty darn near chartreuse yellows." Because that's the colors you're actually seeing, right? And so here's little Margaret coming along, and her response is, "I've been lied to." And Alex, the teacher, just nods and says, "So let's go back and start the tree again." And I looked at it when she told me the story, I just said, "Yes, because that's your job, to show the world they've been lied to." They've been lied to, and they're lied to about almost everything. And our jobs as artists, but especially as art teachers, is to open up their eyes so that they say, "I've been lied to."
Cut it. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Thank you.
But I love that story, and for me, it's the reason to be a teacher, the reason to be an artist, is because people go about the world looking at trees every day, surrounded by phenomena that they simply do not see, but that they think they know.